I think that he also, just as a matter of campaign strategy, was omnipresent. He was everywhere. He was going on podcasts. He was doing social media. And so I think a lot of more conventional political operatives didn't see him coming.
Andrew Cuomo had a more conventional media campaign.
For sure. And I think
lost.
in many ways, he, in addition to the moral disqualifications that went with his history, he just didn't. If anything, he reminded, I think, a lot of people of the status quo. So I think a lot of people are focused on the leftism, the ideological leftism, that I think we shouldn't be so surprised that prevailed in a New York Democratic Party primary. But I think if my party wants to learn lessons from Mamdani's success that are portable to a place like Michigan, where I live, it's less about the ideology and more about the message discipline of focusing on what people care about and the tactical wisdom of getting out there and talking to everybody.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back. A fake friend is way worse than a real enemy. Before we get started, I just want to say, man, fuck Mayor Pete. He sat down with NPR to talk about a lot of different things. But what we'll focus on is how he knows better and still chooses to be on the wrong side of policies and history. In this case, it's about the next mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, and how Mayor Pete talks like he agrees with him, talks about the problems that Mamdani is looking to solve, but also doesn't know. He's not sure yet. He hasn't gotten the email to actually support a candidate like that. It's very weaselly. And then, of course, it's NPR, so I don't expect much from them. But at the end, we'll see the type of question they ask. A fake friend is way worse than a real enemy. I'd rather you straight up say, I'm not with any of that. I don't want nothing to change. I want nothing to change. Whatever's happening right now, I'm okay with it because it's gotten me into a position of power. I don't want nothing to change. Just say that. But he doesn't say that. He's going to pretend. Let's watch some clips and I'll give my thoughts on it afterwards, even though I kind of already did.
You talked about the status quo and Democrats getting stuck defending the status quo. One of your fellow Democrats, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, has talked a lot about this recently. And I can summarize his argument by saying Democrats need to be more populist. We need to acknowledge that people are profoundly dissatisfied with the status quo. We also, as Democrats, he would say, need to be tearing things down, need to be talking about the very few people who seem to be benefiting in this situation. He also wants Democrats to be louder, a little more disruptive in government. What do you make of his approach?
I think it's certainly true that we can't be wedded to the old ways or the status quo. It is wrong to burn down the Department of Education. But I actually think it's also wrong to suppose that the Department of Education was just right in 2024. You could say the same thing about USAID. It is unconscionable that children were left to die by the abrupt destruction of USAID. Unconscionable. It is also clear that USAID developed into something that nobody on a clean sheet would have designed the way it was. There were a lot of problems with development aid and how it was structured. My point is, it's wrong to burn these things down. But it's also wrong to suppose that if Democrats come back to power, our project should be to just tape the pieces together just the way that they were. We should be unsentimental about the things that don't work. We should be fearless in defending the things that do work. And yes, we should be naming the forces, entities, people, often corporations, who stand between a lot of Americans and a better, freer life. There's a particular small slice of that I worked on when I was in transportation, as, for example, a tough regulator of airlines, trying to make sure that they treat their passengers better. But across our entire society and economy, we could be doing better on that because this president has come to power promising to do that. Now, what he's actually doing is exactly the reverse. A tax bill that makes it easier for the wealthiest and corporations and harder for the working class that he claims he represents. But they're talking a good game, and we need to be much more responsive to that.
What is the cultural change in America that you said you felt Democrats had missed?
Well, I think there's a perception that Democrats became so focused on identity that we no longer had a message that could actually speak to people across the board, or that we were only for you if you fit into a certain identity bucket. And the tragedy of that is that I believe the right kind of democratic vision is one that lifts everybody up. It pays specific attention to discrimination or mistreatment of people because they're black or because they're women or LGBTQ or whatever reason that might be. But you don't have to be in this particular combination of categories to benefit from what we have to offer. And I think we really struggled to communicate something a bit more universal. And that's been costly.
He said it should be about doing things that lift everybody up no matter what your identity is. That's beautiful, great, fantastic even. But as we'll see, that doesn't actually mean anything to him. It sounds good and is the right answer. The idea that you have to fit a certain type of identity to have a government that works for you is ridiculous. Again, he talks as if he knows better. And even earlier when he said corporations are the problems in our life, why everything's becoming unaffordable is private equity. Housing, transportation, education, literally everything, video games, movies, everything is going to shit because of private equity being vultures and parasites. If that's a problem that you know it is, the solution isn't messaging, is activity, is action, do something. But Mayor Pete thinks messaging is more important than actually doing things. That's where he mainly disagrees with Mamdanian.
I want to remind people that we're talking in New York City, where the Democratic candidate for mayor, the nominee for mayor, is Zohran Mamdani. What do you make of him?
I think that what he achieved is extraordinary. And a big part of how he did it was by relentlessly focusing on affordability. No matter what the context, the topic, the news of the day, he went straight to the thing that was on New Yorkers' minds, which is how hard it is to afford anything, rent, groceries, you name it. I think that he also, just as a matter of campaign strategy, was omnipresent. He was everywhere. He was going on podcasts. He was doing social media. And so I think a lot of more conventional political operatives didn't see him coming.
Andrew Cuomo had a more conventional media campaign.
For sure. And I think
lost.
in many ways, he, in addition to the moral disqualifications that went with his history, he just didn't. If anything, he reminded, I think, a lot of people of the status quo. So I think a lot of people are focused on the leftism, the ideological leftism, that I think we shouldn't be so surprised that prevailed in a New York Democratic Party primary. But I think if my party wants to learn lessons from Mamdani's success that are portable to a place like Michigan, where I live, it's less about the ideology and more about the message discipline of focusing on what people care about and the tactical wisdom of getting out there and talking to everybody.
Getting out there and talking to everybody about what? If you get in people's faces and start saying, maybe one day we might think about putting a panel together to talk about lowering rents, public transportation being public, having a public grocery stores, people are going to be like, wait, are you planning on doing that? Or are you planning on one day sitting down and meeting about doing that? There's a difference. Those things are actually material in people's life. It's not just kicking the can down the road. You want the getting in people's faces, but you don't want the ideology of we're going to help people. So basically all you want is a loud, empty campaign. That's why you got no votes running for president, because people realized that you're just an empty suit. You're not even a good liar. 2016 Trump ran on healthcare for everybody and draining the swamp, which is anti-corruption and universal healthcare. That sounds like a socialist. He was lying, sure, but he won because that's what people want. It's not just about doing podcasts and talking to people. It's making concrete promises. He said message discipline and focusing on what people care about. Why would people care about housing? Because they don't want to live in the streets. Why would people care about affordable groceries? Because they don't want to starve. Mamdani's success wasn't magic, it was ideological. You could scare people with the terminology, socialism, communism, whatever. But at the end of the day, you could ask people straight up, no matter how far right-wing they are, do you think housing should be more than half of your paycheck? They're going to say, of course not. Do you think your job should be able to bribe politicians so that your wage is way less than a living wage while they make record profits? Even the most hardened Trump supporter, 3-time Trump supporter will say, no, of course I don't want that to happen. Why would I want that? Even people that have socialism K tatted on them would say, yeah, well, I already pay taxes, so transportation should be public. There should be a public grocery stores. If my city's already paying subsidies for large corporations to make profits, we can make it so that we have public grocery stores that don't need to make profits. using that same money that we're subsidizing other companies? Why wouldn't we want that? Why would that be a bad thing in Michigan? Why would somebody in Michigan be like, whoa, no, we don't want to help nobody. What do you think I'm voting for? A government that represents me? It's so nasty. But the nastiness doesn't stop because of this next question.
I was talking the other day to a Democratic member of Congress representing part of New York City who said to me, essentially what you're saying, Mamdani in many ways is the future. He knew how to campaign. He's doing everything right. There's a lot to learn from him. And this lawmaker said, I haven't endorsed him yet because I have a lot of Orthodox Jews in my district. What do you make of that contradiction?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of distinguishing between tactics and ideology. And I would say, he's further left than I am. But also, I think that what he's been able to do is something that our party ought to learn from.
Would you endorse him? Say, Big Ten approach. I don't agree with him about everything, but I endorse him. He's a Democrat.
He hasn't asked me to endorse. I'm not really a player in New York City municipal politics. But I would talk to him about it. Sure.
Mm-hmm. You would talk to him about it, meaning you're not sure that you would or wouldn't.
Yeah, I would want. I mean, to be honest, as somebody who follows this from afar but hasn't exactly dug in on it, I haven't kind of dug in on these policy proposals he's put forward and how they would actually work. I'd want to kind of talk through that. I think the most important job, though, of any mayor, and by the way, I also emerged as a very young, some would have said untested, disruptive figure running for mayor, right? The most important job of any mayor is to pull a community together. You are the walking symbol of what all of the diverse, disparate people in your city have in common. And if I get a chance to talk with him, I'll want to talk with him about how he aims to do that.
What a fucking weasel. Did you see how he started squirming there when the guy asked him if he would endorse him? It's good. Keep your endorsement because you're a piece of shit. Nobody should want your endorsement. Nobody that's actually trying to do something for real should want your endorsement. It's completely unnecessary. That's not the point. The point is, you talked all this good game throughout the interview, but when it was asked, okay, so Big Tent, even if you don't agree with him in some parts, you gonna support? Oh, well, I don't know because blah, blah, blah. Oh, bitch ass nigga. Yo, I do not respect that. Like, there's a lot of things you could say and support that is like, whatever, I don't care. But to pretend to be a good person is way worse than just straight up being a bad guy. I'd prefer a Lindsey Graham than a guy like this. Such a weasel, such a fucking snake. I do not respect this man. And then he started talking about how he found himself in the same situation being a disruptor. Bro, shut up. He just started saying anything towards the end there just to try to move on from that topic. Corny.
I want to ask a little bit about his policy proposals. There's been so much discussion on NPR and elsewhere about his identity and what it means. It's easy to talk about that. It's easy to label him a democratic socialist. But I wonder what some of his actual proposals mean. I think of a proposal that he has because of affordability. It's impossible to live in New York. He proposes a rent freeze. And when I hear that as a former resident of New York City who lived at one time in a rent-stabilized apartment, I think about the fact that New York has had various forms of rent control and rent stabilization since, I think, 1946. So for generations, the government has tried this in various ways. And still nobody can afford to live here, and it's extremely expensive. And his proposal now is to freeze rents at the level at which people already say they can't afford. Does that make sense?
Real quick before he answers, what a stupid question. He's saying it's already unaffordable. Should we do something about that or no? Should we try to do something or should we just say, forget it. Let's just leave them to be homeless? What kind of question is that? You're not even saying what should be done. You're saying, is that even a good idea to try something? Boy, NPR is one of the worst things to happen in this country because they seem like smart people until you actually listen to what they're saying.
I think there's some very logical questions to ask about both who that helps and what comes next. Because if housing is unaffordable, one of the reasons is there's not enough housing. I mean, that's just, that's a basic kind of clear fact.
It's not a fact. There are tens of thousands of empty apartments in New York City right now. Right now. And that's just New York City. Multiply that by every city in the country. There are thousands of empty apartments in the whole country. But they're owned by the thousands in giant lots by giant corporations who benefit from empty apartments because of tax subsidies. So they don't want people to live in them because they get tax breaks. And if you do get to live in them, they could charge you a premium rate because they own all of them. So even saying it's a fact that we don't have enough, that's a lie, whether he knows it or not. If he doesn't know it, then he's just spreading a lie. And if he does know it, which I think he does, He's just a fucking weasel, which makes him way worse than anybody you think is your enemy for real, because he pretends to be your friend. Your enemy will never be able to stab you in the back because you won't turn your back on him. But people like this, they count on you believing in them. I hope this man never gets any real power. Secretary of Transportation, cool, do your thing. Congratulations. You only got that because you were promised that position for dropping out of the race by Obama. I hope that's the last position of power you ever have in this world, because you suck. And as long as you're anywhere near power, everything will continue to go to hell. And if you're still watching, click this video of Piers Morgan calling out a war criminal to her face. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Peace.